And as we have seen in the last session, Dr. MRR says that palliative care is an approach which includes the overall health aspect of an individual, like a patient and his or her family. And it is mainly focusing on the people who are associated with any kind of life-threatening illness, and it focuses not only the physical aspects but also the psychosocial, spiritual, and overall health aspects of a particular individual. So as we know, there are a good number of professionals who are included in this interdisciplinary team, who are there to cater different needs of a patient and his or her family, like doctors, nurses, counselors, social workers, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and a lot more people are included in this. So this is actually an integrated approach which considering the overall aspects of a health, which includes the physical, social, spiritual, financial, and overall aspects of an individual. Now let's have a look in detail into the interdisciplinary team approach. And before that, I would like to remind that the faculty presentation will be up to 40 to 45 minutes, and this will be followed by a discussion on the same, and after that we'll be having a case presentation on the same topic, and after again we'll be having a discussion on the case presentation. And I would like to welcome our faculty of the day, Ms. Manisha Mary Marshall, and who is a physiotherapist and social worker by education, and she is currently working as medical social worker in Pallium, India. I would like to welcome you, Manisha, to this session, and I would like to hand over the session to you. Welcome.
Thanks a lot, Gayatri. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So, this is my pleasure to be spending time with you all, and this is my privilege to be speaking to you all today. I hope all of you all are safe and our families are safe. We're going through a really tough time, but it is our luck that we all are here today. So, without much introduction, I'd like to move on to the topic. Today, I'd like to speak to you all about the interdisciplinary team. And I know for sure that this is a very diverse group, and some of you all might be very aware of the palliative care concept, and some might not be aware of the palliative care concept. Anyways, we'll have to move on to the topic. Let me share my screen. I hope the screen is visible to everybody. We had a really wonderful session the last week by Dr. Raj, and we had brushed up about the primary concepts of palliative care. And I'd like to just give a recap of a few concepts that are very important and that has to be stuck onto our minds. The concepts are, the first concept is the concept of health. When we hear the term health, the thing that comes to our mind mostly is any kind of physical condition. But what we have to always be reminded of is that health is not just something that is to be connected to a physical aspect. So the definition of health is stated as it is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of a disease or infirmity. But even though this is a definition by the WHO, Dr. Raj always says uh, it is just not something that has to be stopped with the social element. There should also be a spiritual element to it. So coming to the next concept is palliative care. By now, you all have got a basic idea about palliative care. So I'd like to say the definition again. This is an approach that improves the quality of life of patients with life-threatening illness and their families through the prevention and relief of suffering by means of early identification and impeccable assessment and treatment of pain and other physical, psychosocial, and spiritual problems. So, the ultimate aim of palliative care is to improve the quality of life of the patients and families, and in turn, provide them relief and prevent them from the health related sufferings. So, in palliative care, as mentioned in the previous definitions, it involves the physical, psychosocial, and the spiritual aspects. The next concept is the concept of total pain, one of the major concepts of main concepts of palliative care. So total pain is a type of suffering that encompasses a person's physical, psychological, social, and spiritual struggles. Most often, when we hear the term pain, it is just only related with the physical aspects, but pain is not just physical, it always encompasses physical, psychological, social, and spiritual struggles. The last point, as mentioned, is illness related suffering is more than just physical distress. I'd just like to pause for a moment. If anybody has any questions or comments, please do feel free to put it up in the chat box. So the next concept is interdisciplinary teamwork or interdisciplinary team. So like the term itself gives out the input, that is, it is a complex process in which different types of professionals work together to share their expertise, knowledge, and skills to impact on patient care. So in an interdisciplinary team, anybody who's involved in patient care can be involved, and these professionals work together, and the ultimate aim is to provide care for the patient. So what is the need of an interdisciplinary team in palliative care? If I have to be speaking about the need of an interdisciplinary team in palliative care, I will have to focus on the components of palliative care. So this picture, as you can see, is a Venn diagram wherein three circles overlap, and the specific elements of each circle is mentioned as: one is disease-specific treatment, the other one is symptom control, and the third one is psychosocial spiritual care. So as you can see, disease-specific treatment can be provided by a set of health professionals, wherein symptom control can be provided by another set of professionals, wherein psychosocial spiritual care is provided by a complete different set of professionals. So when all these circles are overlapped, all these components are overlapped, the complete care can be given to a patient and his or her family. So the ultimate point is that we cannot separate one circle from the other. So coming to the team members who can be involved in an interdisciplinary team, we can have a nurse, doctor, social worker, psychologist, physiotherapist, occupational therapist, pharmacist, art and music therapist, dietitian, caregivers, and volunteers. And the last point mentioned, as you all see, is anyone who can contribute in improving the quality of life of the patient and family can be involved in the interdisciplinary team. So next I have a question for you. So we'll be pulling up a poll in front, and then please do attend the poll so that we can share the results later on. So who among the team is the most important? I'd like to know your inputs on this. I hope you can see the results. I hope you can see the results. A few of you have said that the doctor is the most important, and the rest of the votes go for all are equally important. And the answer is everybody is equally important, because a doctor cannot do the complete care of a patient alone, a nurse cannot do it alone, or a social worker cannot do it alone. So everybody in the team is equally important to deliver the care to the patient and the family. Stop sharing. Um, so coming to the characteristics of a good team. I know this slide is a little crowded, but don't worry about it. The first point is good communication. So when it comes to the interdisciplinary team, there has to be a proper communication between the team members, be it a doctor or a nurse or a physiotherapist or occupational therapist. If there is no proper communication between the team members, the care that is being given to the patient will not be complete. That is, each professional has a set of plan of care wherein, if not discussed with the other professionals, there can be a clash in the delivery of care. I can give you an example of a method of good communication by bringing in a scenario that we follow in Pallium India. So in terms of the inpatient department, we always have the interdisciplinary team meetings, which happen 1 hour every day in the mornings, wherein we discuss the all the patients' cases, and then each of the professional gives in their input about their plan of care for the patient and how things are going from their side. And this has been a very useful drill, and therefore we have been able to provide the very good quality of care, and that is a good example of a good communication, and this can be a very good characteristic of a good team. So coming to the next point, respecting or understanding the roles of the team members. So it can be actually uh, tagged with the first point, that is, if there is a good communication between the team members, there automatically comes in an element of respect and understanding. If one professional does not respect the other professional, then there can be a lot of clashes, and that can ultimately impact the patient care. The next point is ensuring the quality and outcomes of care. So this can be linked to the clear vision and appropriate team processes and resources. The interdisciplinary team working together for a patient's care must have a clear vision. If at all there is a lack of clarity in the vision, uh, the quality of care that we give is going to be affected. And for this, we need good team processes and resources. And this can ultimately help us in ensuring the quality and outcomes of care. Individual rewards and opportunities, training and development opportunities. So in a team, in a palliative care setting, uh, if I have to specifically speak about a team in a palliative care setting, there can be situations where which situations which are very depressing. We can go down mentally and physically too. So in these situations, if the kind of work that an individual does is not being appreciated properly, or if appropriate opportunities are not being given to the team members, this can cause to a lot of problems, and this can affect the quality of work that the professional does for patient care. And the next point is training and development opportunities. So there should be appropriate training and development opportunities given to each professional. That is, if I have to say an example, social workers might not be trained in or might not have a very clear idea about the physical aspects of a patient or the physical symptoms, or how the doctors and nurses manage the conditions. So if at all training opportunities are given for the social workers at least once in a while for understanding the basic concepts, this can help them in a lot of ways. So similarly, it can happen in any ways. Training and development opportunities can be in any ways, and that can lead to the development of a good team. And then comes leadership and management. Even though we do not follow a hierarchy in the healthcare system in palliative care, there is a requirement of a leadership and proper management, because if there is no leadership, the team can be scattered. There are chances that the team can be scattered, but a leadership does not mean that one person is higher than the other person, but it just means that things are in order and the care is being delivered to the patient and family appropriately. The next point and the last point is the flexibility of the team and the individuals within it. So even though there has to be an amount of rigidity in terms of the team and the individuals, in palliative care, there has to be a lot of flexibility because there are a lot of uncertain things that are happening that might happen in a palliative care setting, and specifically when it comes to end of life or any of that sort, things can be very uncertain. And if the team members are not flexible enough, this can ultimately lead to issues and will affect the quality of care given to the patient. So any of these characteristics, if being denied or if being disrupted, can be a challenge to the whole team. So, so yes. So this is the first part of my presentation. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask in the chat box.
Yeah, Ms. Manisha, this is Mudre from Mysore.
Yes, sir, please go on.
Okay. Now, in this particular chart, what you have prepared, there are two things which comes to my focus is that the third point is ensuring the quality and outcomes of care, and the fifth point you have mentioned as clear vision. How do you differentiate these two things? I personally feel that clear vision has to be there for ensuring quality and outcomes of the care.
Exactly, sir.
So, does it really make any difference in this particular chart, or you have got something else in your mind?
No, the point was just to put in the points in front of you. And when I was saying about ensuring the quality and outcomes of care, I did make sure that I correlated it with both of the points that are given below: appropriate team processes and resources, and clear vision. So the ultimate point that I'd like to say is that if the team has a clear vision and the team works accordingly, as you mentioned, the quality of care and the outcomes of care can be really proper. Does that make sense?
Yes, the basic objective of palliative care philosophy is to see that on day-to-day basis, how the quality of the individual can be enhanced by the team. Quality of life can be enhanced. That is the focus.
Exactly.
So that totally translate the vision is that to provide to or enhance the quality of life on minute-to-minute basis. It can be at the time of end of life care, and whether the individual is properly breathing or not. It's easy, comfortable in breathing. Are we providing adequate assistance to breathe him comfortably? All these things matters really. When a person comes with heavy breathing or difficult breathing, if we are able to ease that breathing difficulty, that itself is enhancing the quality of care, life. So if the team works on this particular vision to enhance the quality of life in whatever stage the patient is, can we move a little bit further to improve the quality of life?
Exactly.
If that becomes a vision, obviously the team is successful.
Yeah. Enhancing the quality and outcomes of care is the vision, and making sure that the quality and outcomes of care is the characteristic of a good care. Right. Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot for the input.
Thank you very much.
If there are no more questions, I shall move on to the next slide. So the next element is going to be a very different thing because I am planning to speak about this because I am a social worker, and the only thing I can confidently speak about is the roles of a social worker in palliative care. So most often what we see is the professional social workers and their roles are not being defined anywhere, and it always remains as a doubt in many of the people's minds what social workers actually do. So I'd like to put in a little light on that topic. So let me move on. The first thing that a social worker does is need assessment, and this can be done through effective communication and rapport building. There are two types of need assessments, two components in need assessment, if I have to say. Psychosocial spiritual assessment and economic assessment. So These are the basic steps that we do in case of our patient. First, we have to identify the need of the patient. So when we identify the need of a patient, then things become easier for us, and then we can move on to the interventions and the proper plan of care for the patient. But if when we have to identify the need of a patient, there should be proper communication with the patient and the family, and there should be a very, very, very good rapport with the patient and the family. I will not be speaking much about the first point because I think the next session is on the assessment part. So you can hear more from the next faculty. So moving on to the next point, conducting home visits whenever necessary. So home visits are a part of healthcare and specifically palliative care. But sometimes specialized psychosocial visits might be required. So these are cases wherein we get to spend time with the patient, we get to see them, see their situations really in person, and then we get to spend time with them, communicate with them, understand their issues, and their interventions can be provided accordingly. Sometimes, if they get registered with us through over the phone, or if someone else refers the patient to us, it can be very difficult for us to understand the case. But if we conduct a home visit, things can be much more easier. And yes, that's it.
Ms. Nilyada, do you want to say something? Do you want to add some inputs into this?
Yes, I have a question for both of you. So while we have the next session and it's good, could you give us an example of what kind of psychosocial spiritual assessment you guys particularly undertake, or explain this with an example, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Without taking much time, I'd like to just give in a background of the psychosocial spiritual assessment that we take. We do have a set of questions that we have set for the ease of assessing the patient. So initially, as I've mentioned before, communication, effective communication and rapport building is very important if I have to take the psychosocial spiritual assessment, because this is something related, which is not physical, something that is more of the other side of the healthcare.
So
And-
sorry to interrupt you. Is there a name to this assessment that you use?
No, we have set the assessment accordingly, like based on our experiences and our need. It is something that we have set for ourselves.
Okay, and what would some of the questions look like in this
The
assessment?
major thing that we look at is the genogram. We see the family history and who all are involved in the family. And so if I have to say an example, if in a family we don't see the genogram, some things can be missed out. So we can also find out the connections that they have through the genogram and the echo map that we take. And certain other questions are, when it comes to the psychological aspects, we have their physical appearance, or do they seem to have a low mood, or are they okay? Do they appear normal? So these are some of the questions that we ask in the psychosocial spiritual assessment part. The spiritual assessment is completely different. What we normally do is we don't get to assess the spiritual aspect at the beginning stages. This comes in the later aspects. And when it comes to socioeconomic assessment, we ask them about their ration cards, their
Schemes which they are getting from the government, then any reimbursements for them, and all those basic economic aspects will be coming in that, like the primary breadwinner of the family, who all are the earning members, and all those aspects related to the economic realm will be included in that.
And there are a lot.
Madam, one more question, please. In this connection, what is the role of a social worker in vocational rehabilitation?
Thanks, Dr. Arjun, for bringing it up. We are moving on to that. Like, we have the point in the upcoming slides. Ms. Nilya?
Yes. Yes, that helps. Thank you. And just, I'm really curious to understanding, in your view, what might be the difference, according to you personally, between the role of a social worker and the role of a psychologist. Like, how would you differentiate?
Yeah. So this is a very confusing topic, and I don't know if I am the expert to be talking about this. So maybe we can discuss about this in the upcoming sessions.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. And as I mentioned before, we'll be having a detailed discussion of the assessment part in the coming session.
Thank you.
So coming to the next point, patient navigation. Patient navigation has three components, that is advocacy, education, and facilitation. A patient navigator is a person who navigates the patient and his or her family, or familiarizes the patient and his or her family through the healthcare system. So sometimes what happens is people from very poor economic backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, they do not have an idea of how the healthcare system works and the different things that is to be done in the healthcare system. So a social worker can be of great help, or a social worker can be a support for them during these situations. And when I come to these components, it is advocacy. Advocacy is that the making sure that the patient's rights and the patient's needs are met. Education, educating the patient about the diagnosis, patient and the family about the diagnosis and prognosis. Uh, this part is going to be covered by the case presenter for today, Ms. Sandra. Um, and sometimes what happens is a patient do not get adequate information from the other healthcare team members, because the team members might be busy with a lot of other work, or there are a lot of other work to be done in the other side. But then what happens is the patient and the family has the right to know about their diagnosis and has the right to clarify all the questions about this. So here there comes a division of labor, and that is a social worker can be engaged for this purpose, wherein the social worker educates the patient about the diagnosis and prognosis. And if there is collusion, there can be appropriate ways in which the uh, collusion can be taken away and the bad news can be broke. And there are a lot of other aspects to it. And when I come to facilitation, facilitating the resources and opportunities is also another role of a social worker as a patient navigator. The next point is rehabilitation. As Dr. Ajayan mentioned, rehabilitation is one of the major things that has to be done for a patient. The first point is making sure that they have access to adequate food, shelter, water, and sanitation. Even though the physical pain has to be treated, uh, treating the physical pain alone would not relieve them from all the other factors they are facing, and which leads to more pain in their mind. So provision of their basic amenities, if at all they do not have access to adequate food, shelter, water, sanitation, by linking them to government schemes, or by liaising with the government authorities, can be one of the major roles of a social worker. And the next thing is vocational rehabilitation. Vocational rehabilitation is a rehabilitation which is given to a patient or the family members who are suffering, and this can help the patient and the family to generate income, which in turn can help them in the further days. So, for example, if if a young man comes to us with uh, spinal cord injury, and he was the only breadwinner of the family, the wife and the children might be in distress because they do not have anyone else to support them from now on. The only source of income was their father. So in this case, after a lot of other processes, we can eventually train them and help them with a vocational rehabilitation, wherein they are asked for their interest, first of all, and then the practicality of that can be tested. And accordingly, they can be provided with a vocation, which can be jointly done by the family, wherein they can generate a source of income from that. And then this can ease their pain. So the next thing is education support. What is most often seen is that if a patient is, if the main breadwinner of the family is down with a terminal illness or a long-term condition, the education of their children becomes a very big question in front of them. And most often the patients and and their spouses think and they are more worried about what is going to happen to our children. Are our children going to end up like us? So this can add to a lot of pain, uh, to their physical pain, and therefore providing them, assessing the patient and the family completely, and providing them with education support can be of great help for the patient and the family and can help in easing their pain. Then another type of rehabilitation is providing them with the necessary aids based on assessment. This can be travel support from hospitals to their houses, or it can be support for surgery, or support for house modification. If it is a case of a spinal cord injury, it can be support for ramp construction and so on. So whatever is being done as a part of rehabilitation is based on the assessment that we take in the beginning. So if the patient is identified as a socioeconomically from a poor background, it is very necessary that we support them with the requirements. The next part is providing the psychological support. So the best uh, group of professionals who can provide a psychological support to the patient would be trained clinical psychologists. But we as social workers also get an opportunity to provide them with the basic amount of psychological support. The two of the ways that I've mentioned here is by providing a space to vent out. Sometimes all you have to do is give them a space to vent out, and that can ease them from a lot of pain. And the second point is being available for the patient and family. Sometimes what we see is that the patients, even before, like whenever they have an issue, they take up their phone and call any one of the social workers. And this is a result of building a strong rapport with the patients and making sure that we are available for the patients. Sometimes the doctor cannot be accessible very soon because he will be busy with the he or she will be busy with the other aspects of the patient care. So we can be there as the people who are accessible to the patient and the family at the first stretch. Uh, the next point is linking the patients and the families to the government schemes and services. This is one of the things that we all forget most often. That is, we have to utilize the government schemes and services that are already available for the patients with different kinds of illnesses. But even as social workers, we do have limitations in knowing the schemes and services, so we do have to be updated about the same. If the patients are given an opportunity to link themselves into the schemes and services, this can be of great support to them. So we try our best to do that, but sometimes there are a lot of barriers in the same as well. So coming to the next point, resource mobilization. Resource mobilization is something that has to be done from another person's side for the patient, because it can be human resources, materialistic resources, or financial resources. So if the resources are not mobilized properly for the patient from the area where they live or from the community, the resources there get wasted. So it's very important that we identify the resources in the community and mobilize volunteers wherein we can help the patient and the family. The next point is discharge planning. Discharge planning So whenever a discharge is planned for a patient in Pallium India, we practice a process wherein the social workers go and speak to the patient and the family, making sure that they are ready for the discharge. They do not have any doubts regarding the plan of care in the future. And yes, coming to the next point, conducting community awareness programs. So community awareness programs are very important in palliative care, because mostly when someone hears someone from outside, or even people from the healthcare system, when they hear, sometimes get confused with the term palliative care and hospice care. So what people think is that palliative care is something that is provided at the end of the life, but we have to make sure that there are adequate community awareness programs wherein the concept of palliative care, that the palliative care can be given from the point of diagnosis of an illness, has to be spread across the world, so that people understand the need of interventions from the beginning of the disease or the illness. And there can be various other kinds of awareness programs also, which can be put forward. Uh, it can be specific days, celebrations, or anything. Like, for example, if it is an anti-tobacco day program, this is something that leads to cancer, and the community has to be made aware about the goods and bads of the same. So, conducting community awareness programs is also one of the roles of a social worker. Coordinating trainings for volunteers. So, like I mentioned in the previous slide, resource mobilization. So, there has to be a lot of volunteers involved in the interdisciplinary team, because volunteers are the ones who has great access to the patient more than the healthcare professionals that work within the hospital setting. If we train enough volunteers from each community, then these volunteers can be available for the patient at times of need, even when we cannot reach the patient and we cannot deliver the proper care of treatment for the patient in the initial stages. These volunteers can be there for them and can act as a bridge between the patients and the healthcare professionals. So, coordinating trainings for volunteers is very important, since volunteers are a huge uh, backbone for the palliative care society. And the next part is crisis management. Uh, Social workers can be strong parts of crisis management, like every other health professionals. If I have to say an example, we have a COVID-19 palliative care helpline, which was initiated in 2020 when the COVID crisis started. And through this, we were able to deliver care for a lot of people. Uh, and the social workers are the ones who are coordinating the event, coordinating the helpline, and we are the ones who do the primary assessment of the patient, and then it goes to the complete interdisciplinary team, and the team works together to provide the types of care that we, with the limited resources, we can provide to the patient and the family. So this is our helpline number. It's still active. Um, and the last part is conducting events to keep the patients and families engaged. So even though this sounds so vague, it is very important that we keep the patients and families engaged. Uh, they are mostly stressed out. So it's our responsibility to be caring for the patients and families, and giving them times wherein they can enjoy, and giving them memories to cherish about. So this picture is one of the picture that we uh, took recently for one of the events that we conducted for the inpatients and their caregivers in our inpatient unit in Pallium, India. So when you see the smiles on everybody's face, that's like a really rewarding feeling. I would like to end my presentation with this. So this was one of the picture um, that we clicked almost a few years ago, wherein our spinal cord injury patients were given an opportunity to visit the beach and just see the smiles on their face, and this explains it all. This explains how rewarding this feeling can be and this profession can be. So this is the end of my presentation. Now we can move on to the questions.
Madam, one question please. What are the projects run by Pallium India for resource mobilization? Will you name out what are the projects run by
Sorry?
Pallium India now for resource mobilization?
Yeah, there are a
Will you
lot
name?
of projects running in Pallium India for the same now. We have Asim Premji projects and other projects by certain banks and a lot of other projects. I think we'll be covering about this also in some upcoming presentations, sessions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
If there are any
Hello,
questions-
madam. Hello, madam. This is Pallav Bhattacharya. I just have, I think I have put on the question on the chat box as well. I mean, do we have any methods of intervention, or like if any, on the, as you said, you talked about intervention. So do we have any such methods of intervention?
Sir, could you be a little more specific with your question, if you may?
See, I'm asking about the methods of intervention. Like, as you said, there are different varieties of interventions which normally social workers and their team takes, on this ill-fated patients. So my question is, what would be the methods of intervention? Like, we can.
Could you give an example of the same? If
I think he's asking on, like we are doing various numbers of interventions, like psychosocial intervention itself is a great example for that, because for people who doesn't have any job and who are down with any life-threatening illness, we would definitely be focusing by engaging them in giving them any vocations like training in stitching, then poultry farming, and a lot more things like that. So it is one of the important interventions that we have been providing on
So
vocational.
like you don't have any such specifications on the intervention methods. Like it is, I guess, seeing the condition of the patient, you keep on having this this intervention methods experimented, right? Is this what you're trying to say?
Sir, can I ask you something? It was actually not clear. Can you please
See,
make it
my
concise?
question, yeah, my question is like, though we are absolutely new to this thing, this entire chapter of palliative care, all I wanted to know here was, the type of intervention. See, I mean, as we can say, maybe I'm not a doctor, but then I am not qualified enough to put through the varieties and the methods by which the patient can be relieved, partial relief, or let's say, how do we analyze it? Do we have any such specific methods, whether the patient is improving or the patient isn't improving? I mean, is there any validated method? This is my question.
Sir, are you asking about the physical interventions or are you asking about the social work aspect, the psychosocial?
No, I'm asking about physical interventions.
Okay, okay, fine. So the physical interventions,
Like, you can take your time. If it is on the next session, fair enough. I'll wait. No
No,
problems. Maybe I'm just asked
I don't
this.
think this is going to be covered in the upcoming sessions because this is purely a psychosocial and other classes are coming up. But then physical interventions are based on the assessments by the physiotherapists and the doctors and the nurses.
Okay, right.
We social workers do not play any role directly in providing physical interventions to the patients.
So it mostly depends on the prognosis theories or the prognosis therapies of the psychotherapists as well as the doctors, I believe.
Sorry?
I guess the entire thing is on the prognosis of the doctors and the psychotherapists.
Physiotherapists, do you mean physiotherapists?
Yeah, physiotherapists, right.
Exactly, sir. Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Madam, as a social worker, you are doing a lot for the pollution purpose. Or as a beginner, they may not understand the meaning of pollution. So will you please explain pollution and how can a social worker can give relief to this pollution?
Yes, sir. Thanks for bringing that up. Pollution is a very important term in healthcare, and even this is going to be covered in the next session. But then I'd just like to give a base idea of it. Pollution is the process of shielding an information from any person, be it the patient or the family members. The information can be colluded from the patient, from the doctors, from the healthcare system to the patient, or the family to the patient. So there are a lot of types of pollution. I think this needs a little more explanation. So we'll talk about that in the next session.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
There was a question from Jintu Josh. How can we know more about the government schemes available for patients? Actually, there are certain organizations that work specifically to provide government schemes to the patients. So Hak Darshak is HAQDARSHAK is one of the organizations that are well moving with that. So maybe you can visit their website for the same. Is that clear?
Or halfway home is a best example from social justice department help with the social justice department. Our halfway home is a best example, I think so.
So the next question is, so is social worker a right person to deal with the diagnosis and prognosis? This is a little tricky question because social worker is not the only person who has to be dealing with the diagnosis and prognosis. That is where the necessity of an interdisciplinary team comes. But we do have a major role in communicating the diagnosis and prognosis with the patient. I think someone, Sindhu has put up the link to Hak Darshak in the chat box. Thanks, Sindhu. If there are no more pressing questions, we shall move on to the...
We shall move on to the case presentation of interdisciplinary team. So we have here as the case presenter, Ms. Sandra Johnson, who is working as a medical social worker in Pallium, India. And she has her expertise in working with IP and patient coordination. So I welcome you, Sandra.
Okay, thank you, Gayatri. So I hope now you all got an understanding regarding what is IDT, its components, benefits, and the importance of having an IDT approach in a palliative care setting. So thank you, Manisha, for the wonderful session. So here we can move to the case presentation. So with this case presentation, you will get more idea regarding the various interventions or on how we can intervene in an individual's life in improving the quality of life. So today we are going to discuss about Mr. M. He's 40 years old. Diagnosis is traumatic quadriplegia. And his wife is a primary caregiver. And before this accident, he was a daily wage worker. So this is just an overview of the person. So regarding the medical history, the patient had a fall from a tree before 4.5 years, become quadriplegic. And now his situation is that he couldn't sit by himself without any support. Basically, he needs the support of his wife for everything. And he had undergone multiple surgeries. And now he has complaints of pressure sore, muscle spasm, Physiotherapy, during the initial days, he used to go for physiotherapy on regular basis, but gradually due to financial constraints and all, it became occasionally. So this is about the medical history of Mr. M. And moving on to the insight, family as well as the patient was aware of the diagnosis, but regarding the prognosis, the family was aware, but the patient was partially aware. And at the time of admission, the team had communicated the prognosis, and at present he is in the stage of acceptance. And regarding palliative care, all are aware. So here is a family overview. So as I mentioned earlier, Mr. M was the only breadwinner of the family, and Mr. M and Mrs. M have been married since 9 years, and this is their second marriage. So Mr. M got legally separated, and in that first marriage, he has a daughter, and currently she is staying with Mr. M, and Mrs. M's first husband had passed away due to some health conditions. And currently daughter is studying in the 10th grade. And regarding the family support system, the poor family support and relatives are not financially sound to provide a continuous support to this family. So during the initial days, they used to get the support, but gradually it got decreased. So this is the socio-economic overview of the family. So Mr. M was the sole breadwinner of the house. And since 4.5 years, family has no regular source of income. And currently they own a house which is partially constructed with the support from the local self-government. And the family comes under below poverty line category. And ration is a great relief for the family to meet their food requirements. And family has a debt of around 2 lakhs, which they have taken for the treatment. And even now they have not repaid it. And pension is the only source right now. And another major issue is the transportation facilities. So they have no proper road. And in case of any medical emergency or hospital emergency, they have to call their neighbors or friends to lift him to the main road. So right now, this is a major concern of the family. And during the initial days, family received the support from Mr. M's friends, neighbors, and all. But gradually, it got decreased. And now the family is under great financial constraint. So this is a psychological overview of Mr. M. So he's worried about his future, whether he could earn for his family, whether he will be able to look after his family as he was doing earlier, or whether he could come out from the situation. And regarding wife's future, he says that if something happens to him, what will be her condition? She's alone and there will be nobody to support her. That's also a major concern for him. Daughter's education, academic expenses, another major concern. Then lack of family support is also a psychological concern of Mr. M. So in the previous session, on the before session, Manisha has mentioned about the total pain concept. So when we come under this total pain, we can divide the entire things in under 4 heads. That is physical, psychological, socio-economic, and spiritual. So the physical concerns, which includes being bedridden, pain, pressure sore, discomfort due to colostomy, and increasing muscle spasm. So psychological concerns include fear of death, uncertainty about future, worry about financial instability, anxiety about wife's future, daughter's education, lack of family support, guilty for being a burden for the family. And socioeconomic concerns, no earning member in the house, depleting finances, funding of daughter's education, lack of social support, lack of proper transportation. And while coming under spiritual, loss of hope, lack of meaning and purpose in life. So these are the various concerns under 4 heads. And so here I would like to put forward some questions for the discussion. So the first is, what is the role of an IDT in Mr. M's plan of care? What type of interventions can be provided to Mr. M? How important do you feel it is to communicate with the patient regarding the prognosis? So these are the 3 questions. So I would like to get the suggestions or ideas from the team. I welcome you to put forward your ideas in the chat. So after this, after getting the suggestions from your side, we will be moving to the interventions which we have done from our side.
So kindly put your suggestions in the chat box, or you can unmute yourselves and answer the questions. So as we have understood now that IDT, interdisciplinary team, plays a really key role in plan of care of an individual, a patient. So you can definitely give us your suggestions. Better ideas would be helpful for us too. So consider this as a learning experience and please give your suggestions.
So I will just give out these points. So just have a look on this points, and you can mention your thoughts and reach heads.
Yeah, may I come in? This is Mudrai from Mysore.
Yes, sir, please proceed.
Okay, can you put on the slide again those 4 blocks of the yeah, thank you. Now the team has already made the assessment. What are the needs in different sections: physical, psychological, socio-economic, and spiritual. Now, coming to the physical aspects, obviously the roles are different of all the team members. Now, with this segregation of needs, the roles are already identified. The duties are already identified. Coming to the physical aspects, like doctors and nurses, they can work on the bed sores, pain management, and increasing muscle spasm. Probably the physiotherapist will be able to help on this. Being bedridden, definitely it's a very, very menacing status of life. How long this is going to happen. From the doctors and the nurses will be working on this physical intervention to bring down the pain, to bring down muscle spasm, and managing pressure sores. Probably even training the primary caregivers, like wife, is how to position the patient, how to provide aeration to the pressure source. And this is one aspect of empowering the primary caregivers to take care of the patient in the absence of primary health professionals. This is one aspect. Coming to the socio-economic aspect, now this is a very, very difficult aspect where the community has to get involved to pitch in support for the depleting finances. Probably one small thought I would like to provide, that if I'm having today in my pocket 100 rupees, all those 100 rupees, it doesn't belong to me. A part of it belongs to the society because I am an asset of the society. I am an asset created by the society. So obviously I need to build up that particular culture, giving culture, to see that someone else is also helped and his quality of life is also enhanced. Kerala is already very well known in this to bring in the community support. So to bring in the financial support, definitely for the funding of daughters' education, or in Mysore, we have done a couple of cases here where the mother is suffering from this final stage of cancer. She was terribly having a lot of pains, particularly because her daughter had to be admitted to school. So our team went around Mysore and found out schools, talked to those administrators, and convinced them to take these kids into the school. Admission was obtained free of cost. This is a very rare thing to happen, but it happened. I'm very glad that my team could do that. So listening to this, that her children have been admitted to school, she was very, very happy about it. And probably after 1 week or 10 days, she peacefully exited from this world. And the lack of social support is to see that the extended family, whether they can be brought in. We need to look at the extended family members available, how they can be supporting this particular family. And transportation is always a difficult issue for a bedridden patient. It is ideal to see that the service reaches the bedridden patient through a team approach. Now the palliative care reaches him every now and then and provides the required service at the doorstep. This is the second aspect. Probably I may be missing a few points. You can definitely add on to that. And the psychological intervention, the fear of death and the uncertainty about future, worrying about financial instability, all these things, it happens to every family in different stages. But if we are able to listen to the patient carefully and find out which is the core issue which is bothering him, future of the wife, whether there is any possibility of training that lady in some kind of vocational training, getting a job for her somewhere in a nearby place, or even motivating her to start exploring to get a job. Many times they get depressed and they will not be moving out. One small example is that about 4 or 5 years back, we were taking care of a terminally ill cancer patient. At that time, wife went out and start earning. It could be a small amount of 200 rupees or 250 rupees a month per day as a daily wage earner. And nearly after 2 years, the patient passed away. In one of our, when we were doing some review meetings, suddenly she appeared and she came with a fist full of currency notes. Her name was Shantama. Her son was studying in BCom because it was a very, very difficult thing for her to arrange money for all those things. Just a small intervention of ours, that physical care was provided. She was able to go out and earn money to provide for her son's education. She came on that day and handed over notes. There were 5,000 rupees with her. She was telling that because you came to our house and took care of my husband, I was able to go out and work. Kindly use this money for another cancer patient. She was hardly earning about 150 or 200 rupees a day. Look at the richness of these people. Very meticulously, she saved 500 rupees for 10 months and then brought it to our organization, gave 5,000 rupees. I mean, this is the kind of empowering we need to do. Every family, we need to look out for the opportunity for providing or empowering the people to think how they can survive. It is not only for survival, it is also to sustain the reasons for survival. Why she should be surviving? Because there is a son who is studying, she has to survive. If that is to be sustained, a continuous communication has to be opened up to see that the brighter side is always available in life. That is where the team approach. Psychologists can definitely help in this, to bring down the patient anxiety because of wife. So the wife has to be taught probably how to communicate with the patient to making him more comfortable about her future. These are all the things which needs to be looked into in totality. And the transparency between the palliative care team and the primary caregivers as well as the patient. If this is maintained, probably this can be taken care better. Guilt for being burdened, of course, this can be definitely be brought down in the sense that hundreds of accidents happen daily, everywhere somebody else is getting hurt and becoming bedridden. This is not the only one case, but we cannot throw these kind of suggestions, but it has to come from within. Of course, spiritual matter, I don't think I'll be able to talk much on this. Probably to make the patient understand the present status and the way he has to progress. If that is accepted by the patient, that itself is going to be a spiritual support. If I missed out on some points, Manisha, you can definitely cover it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. So you could imbibe all these aspects by sharing your experience. So it was really an eye opener for us too. So thank you so much for sharing. And when we have, yes, sir, thank you. And a lot of suggestions came in the chat box. So empower family members for finance. Then Any training given to the wife? Yes, of course. We were given some training for the wife, and yeah, training for education support, vocational support. Yeah, we have tried all those things, and IDT can arrange for some financial support. Yeah, of course, Dr. Shailaja says that physical aspects can be taken by doctors and nurses. Yeah, absolutely, ma'am. And socioeconomic from government schemes. So social workers also try to link them to the available government schemes. And we also train his wife being the primary caregiver and being the primary breadwinner for the family. We have arranged some training programs for the wife, and psychological from counselors or psychologists. Yeah, absolutely, ma'am. Then psychological support is being available for the patient and family. Yes, yes, absolutely. Then and Jintu Joe says that psychological support to make him accept the situation. Yeah, it is very essential to make him accept the situation. Yeah, it's very essential. And physical support with the medical team and financial support also. Regular visits. Yeah, absolutely, sir. Regular visits. Then proper education about his condition and also to his wife and child. Yeah, absolutely. Empower family members. Yes. So those were the points which came up in the chat box. So Sandra, can you please explain what all interventions from our part? So what were the things that we have done to empower the entire family? So can you please?
Sure, Gayatri. So these are the interventions which we have done from our part. So in the initial stage, we have done the home care, which includes doctor, nurses, and volunteer. And from that visit, we understood the necessary of a physiatry visit. And he got referred to a physiatry team, and a physiatrist, a physiotherapist, nurse, social worker, and volunteer visited them. And after doing the primary assessment and based on the requirement, we have given them wheelchair, hospital code, and orthosis. And later on, we have given the financial support for the ramp construction for the wheelchair friendly house. And he had complaints of a wound, and we have arranged an IP admission for wound management, and physiotherapy were given on regular basis. And during that IP admission period, we have communicated the prognosis to the patient. And currently, he's in the stage of acceptance, as I mentioned in the previous stage, previous slide. And with the help of occupational therapist, we have arranged the necessary interventions like modified equipments to improve the activities of daily living. So at present, his wife is feeding the food and giving out the water and every such things. So we have given him a modified spoon and a water bottle, so he could he could eat by himself. So like that, we can reduce his dependency on the primary caregiver. So that was another major intervention from our side. And liaising with local self-government. So this mainly done for the transportation concern, and this is currently ongoing. And we have connected with the local self-government, their respective ward member on this issue, and we have raised the issue, and they are doing the necessary steps, and we are doing the continuous follow-up on that. Definitely it will take some time, but still we are following that. And linked with the government schemes. So daughter's education was a main concern of the family. So we have shared the details of the various government schemes which is available for the early child scholarships and all. So we have given the details for them, and they are also getting some help from the schools and all. And from our side, we have given education support for the daughter. And vocational rehabilitation was another intervention. So poultry farming was the suggestion came from the family side. So that the benefit is that the right now the patient needs a 24/7 care from the caregiver. So it's not she has no other choices to go went out of the house or for to engage in other occupations. So with this poultry farm, she can look after the patient as well as she can earn an income source. At the same time, patient can also engage in this. So that was the idea behind for giving this poultry farm support. So these are the major interventions, and right now, even now, we are doing regular home visits to the family. And these are the various interventions. And before, Sir has mentioned wonderful points and shared excellent thoughts with us. So we are happy to share these interventions. And if you have more suggestions, you can definitely put in the chat box. And this is all about my presentation. And thank you for listening. And if you have any suggestions or ideas or thoughts or confusions, please ask or put in the chat box. Thank you.
So thank you, Sandra and Manisha, for the wonderful session. I think everything is beautifully covered. And we are eagerly waiting to get more suggestions from our team. So you could have maybe a variety of ideas. So please put your suggestions in the chat box. Please feel free to unmute yourself and speak.
Madam, why couldn't we make use of or halfway home to this patient?
Sir, currently due to this COVID crisis, we are not, our halfway home is not functioning. So we are planning in the future. So right now, we have made these interventions and this halfway home.
Okay.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you can.
Yes, you are audible.
I'd just like to clarify something for you also. For those who are not aware of the term halfway home, this is one term which is used in Pallium India. So this is a department in Pallium India wherein we have kept a space for rehabilitating the spinal cord injured and CDA patients. So by the term halfway home, we meant so we rehabilitate them in a place where they are halfway to their house. So this is a concept this is the idea of the whole term halfway home. So it's just a place of rehabilitation for the spinal cord injured and the CVA patients in Thailand.
Manish, I have got one question. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You
Yeah,
are.
okay. I always envy the position of Kerala in terms of this implementation of palliative care, particularly because of the volunteer strength. We have been working in Mysore for the last 6 years intensely to go to the next level of palliative care. Initially, we were looking at around about 100, 120 patients. Now the number has gone up to 700. We have about 450 patients in home-based settings, about 250 patients outpatients, they are registered. And we have an inpatient facility for about 16 beds. Now, on average, it runs 50% occupancy, somewhere between 8 to 12 patients are always there. Now, motivating people or inspiring people to become volunteers has been a challenge for us. I have been going around talking to people in the many associations and clubs and this, labor unions, all those things. Wherever I see a lot of people, I always see them as a great resource, that at least 5 people can be coming into palliative care as volunteers. Still, we have not made a dent. In this last few years, have been working to see that this, well convinced, volunteers are to be built up. And when Dr. Rajgopal was here in 2019 January for this, dedicating our inpatient center, he told me that this is a great challenge. You will have to wait for that particular moment to get those 10 or 20 well entrenched volunteers, then it will start snowballing. But even to get the 20 people has become extremely challenging. I have not lost this hope. I'm still working for that. Of course, the recent COVID has really dampened this completely the spirits now of people. It is so everybody is fearing the COVID now. And how did you go about and how did you build the volunteer force? Well, is there any tool available for that? What's the kind of process you opted for that, process you devised for that to build volunteers? That's my question.
So, sir, I think for this question, an apt person is here to answer this. Dr. Ajayan, he is one of the volunteers of Pallium India since many years. So, sir, can you please give your inputs into this? How we are building volunteers and how they are remaining a very strong, a backbone of Pallium India. Can you please add your input?
Yes, we are almost 45 active volunteers here in Pallium India. And on every Fridays, we have team meeting and the volunteers are permitted to attend the team meeting and give their suggestions. Moreover, every third Monday, there will be a meeting exclusively for volunteers to talk out the future plans on education. This education support is being carried out by the volunteers only. The peoples are identified by the social workers and the educational support is being carried out by the volunteers, and the volunteers will have a liaison with the students. I have 5 children under my mentorship. Like that, more than 75 children were adopted and under this educational support program. For this vocational rehabilitation, we are in Pali India is an example because we are conducting petty shops. We are conducting petty shops and jewelry making, soap making, candle making, paper bags making, more than flower baking, umbrella baking, etc. are the special significant examples of this vocational rehabilitation. Along with that, backyard poultry, poultry rearing, cow and cattle rearing, etc., are also being carried out here. The 45 volunteers are working as a single person without any category, without any status, without any politics, without any religion, caste, etc. That is the
Okay, thank you, sir.
that is the position of our volunteers. That is.
Thank you, Dr. Ajayan. Basic. Now you said you have got 45 people in your team. Now these 45 people, how they were procured?
First of all, Pali India is conducting basic training for volunteers for 5 days. For the first 3 days, they have the theory portion. Second 2 days, home visit. Not in the COVID period, previously. That is a basic training course. After that, there will be a modified updation for this training. High level, second level training. For that, we will issue, they will issue certificate like that. And these 45 people were selected after conducting more than 300 volunteers. more than conducting 300 training for 300 volunteers, we have selected 45. They are, unfortunately, we are all retired persons from the departments, various departments, from secretariat, from legislature complex, I am basically, I am a veterinary doctor. After completion of 33 years in the field, I have retired as Joint Director of Animal Husbandry. Like that, additional secretaries are there. Gulf returnees are there. Like that. Different categories are mobilized together and we function as a single barrier. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Zin. Thank you very much. That is partially, it's really, it's really interesting how you have taken it forward. Let me try to implement your ideas now. Probably I'll come back to you telling you about the success. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Okay,
sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, sir. Just to sum up, so in the previous slide, we have mentioned about the community awareness programs. So this is one of the major resource where we mobilize these volunteers, and later on we will give separate trainings for the volunteers, and followed by that we will add them, or we will join, or we will make them to join in our regular home visits. And in every activities which is undertaking in Pallium India, like education support, vocational rehabilitation. So we will keep on touch with these volunteers while implementing various interventions in each patient care. And another major resource is the Students Initiative in Palliative Care, where we collaborate with the colleges in various universities, so that those interested students, after getting an idea of palliative care and palliative services, they will join with us. And for them, for that specific group of students, we will arrange special training sessions. And those who are interested will join with us or will remain with us in later activities. And even in our home visits before this COVID pandemic, we used to add those students in our home visits to make them more clarity regarding our services. So these are the various ways in which we mobilize these human resources for our palliative care services. And one major thing is that we will keep on touch with them. We will make them to involve in our activities. In every activities, volunteers will be a major part. And this is the idea of maintaining our this human resource in our patient care. Sir, I hope you are clear.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was very neatly, it has been explained. That's what I was telling Dr. Ajin, that we'll try to implement a few of these things, and let me come back and tell you that we have been successful. I'm hopeful of that.
Definitely, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, one more thing. Under our leadership, we will mobilize finance also. That's with conducting food fest and art festival, etc., etc. We are mobilizing money also for Pallium India.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
So any other suggestions or points to be added along with this? You can please unmute yourselves and ask. So are there any more questions?
Yeah, this is Mohan Kumar.
Yes, sir, please.
Can you just put a light on how the technology is used during this pandemic? Like, are you reaching the patients through technology?
Yes, sir, that we have already mentioned in the slide that we were running a helpline which helped us a lot to connect our patients. So many of our patients, not many, majority of our patients were not able to come to the OP, Parium OP or the link centers for their treatment, for continuing their treatment. So it was very difficult for them. So what we have done is that we implemented a mechanism like telemedicine. So in that helpline, a number was given like 8606884889. So which was circulated in the social media. So many people were known to this particular thing, and many from different parts of Kerala and outside Kerala, a lot of people has contacted us. So what we were doing is that two social workers were there. So we were registering the patient and taking the initial assessment, and after that we transfer. After assessing their needs, we transfer the case sheets to the doctors who were in charge of telemedicine. So what they were doing is that they'll contact the patient through WhatsApp video call, and after examining the patients, they will suggest the needy medicines, or any other referral services is needed. They were also ready to link the patient to the services. So actually, telemedicine and technology really played a very good role in connecting to our patients as well as to the volunteers, because we were collecting the volunteers through home visits and all. Physical presence was there, but once the pandemic started rising, we were unable to connect them. So what we have done is we started online training programs. We have started Zoom meetings, and a lot of technological implementations were there to connect with our patients and volunteers. So technology was actually, we have utilized technology very well, I think. So it was very essential for patients and mm, volunteers to get connected in that crisis time. So it was beautifully covered by from our part, actually.
Yeah, thank you.
Madam, do we have any topic on communication?
So definitely, we'll be having that.
Okay.
So I hope there is no more doubts or experiences to be shared. So I thank each and everyone to be a part of this wonderful session. So it was actually a great learning experience for us too, because we could gather a lot of inputs from many of our participants. So thank you so much, and thank you Ajay sir, especially because your presence made this once again a very fruitful one, because you could able to illustrate the activities which are done by which are doing from the volunteer part. So thank you so much for that. So thank you so much for sir, and everybody, thank you so much for joining in, and we'll be having the next session on next Wednesday from 3:30 to 3 to 4:30 p.m. Laying the foundation of good practice assessment will be our topic. So thank you so much, and we'll be sharing the learning materials. Thank you so much. So kindly give your feedback, and we'll be providing you the link. So just click on that and kindly give your feedback. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.